I've seen a dozen articles between in my mind, it
Good luck.
says that steroids are overly dosed. Our tier grades are not. Sometimes you're oh, that let me pull up that quote and send it to you. Okay. Because yeah, that is not the case. No, I said something like, this really provides clarity. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I was part of the 21 sub-agencies that were.
Hey, how you doing?
Fine, how you doing, Carl?
Long time no see.
Yeah, yeah.
Liz, how are you?
How you doing? Fine.
I'm doing well. Hanging in. It's not a problem with things going on. Another major
Hey, how you doing?
You're around in a while, John.
Yeah.
Good morning. I made a big mistake sitting with you.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and then he acts like, what is this about? So, Christine called me when I was there, that person at MWDOC, he must have looped her into it because she called me and she's like, what's this about? I said, well, it's just a program idea, and we need to flesh it out. She's like, oh, it's very
Good morning, Kathy Green says it's 8:30 time to start and she doesn't want to waste any more time. Sounds like her. What she told me. I haven't got the coffee yet, but public comments, there's not that many of you here. No public comment at the moment. Items received too late to be agendized.
There are none.
Items returned to the committee less than 72 hours. Apparently none. MWD update, who's it back?
It's gonna be me.
And you'll do a wonderful job, I'm sure.
The donuts have been hiding my coffee.
I understand. Well, Ms. Green wants her update, sir.
All right.
And haven't been married as long as I have, I've done what you should do.
Well, this will be a short presentation because we normally track the water supply conditions, but I think we all kind of know that it's dry. And I'm just going to highlight just certain components of this that, just for some that may want additional information, or when they're providing information to your stakeholders or to your neighbor, just to kind of highlight a couple of interesting facts along the way. You know, the drought is not just something good illustration that the drought, in essence, was really started right after we had that wet year in 2010-11. And then in December 2011, kind of at the end of it, we started to see that there was some dry conditions in the kind of the tips of the state of California. And then you started just seeing that increase over time. You saw at the end of 2013, the central area of California had an exceptionally extreme dry year. And I think if you recall, 2013 was considered one of the driest years on record, and 2014 was one considered the hottest year on record. And you can kind of see that where the peak of this drought occurred in December of 2014, where you had basically 99% of the entire state under a certain level of drought. It's improved slightly since March, but as you can see, that the improvement was not much. Now, like I said, 2013 was the driest year on record. 2014 was the hottest year on record, and 2015 is looking at it as one of the lowest snowpack on record, and I'm going to talk about that. Precipitation-wise, you'll see that when we were going into 2013, ending 2013, we were hoping that 2014 was going to produce something. At the end of December, we had actually a hope, and we were hoping that the 2014-15 year was going to alleviate the drought, or at least get us to average conditions. And you'll see here that December gave us 7 inches of surplus going into the water year. And we were hoping that based on that, and as long as we have average conditions, we're going to be able to put water in storage, and we're going to hopefully get out of this drought. January was just dismal, as we illustrated and talked about. You can see here's the normal range. This is what we actually received in Northern California. It was due to the fact that kind of like the high pressure just kind of sat there right in the Sierras and really provided no precipitation. February improved slightly, but not enough. As we see in March and in April, the deficit continued on reaching that normal level. And as an illustration here on the bottom chart, you'll see this is the plateau that just started occurring on the precipitation wise. It was an improvement of last year. However, you can see that this year of 39 inches overall cumulative is better than last year, and that actually allowed the state to provide a little bit more water than last year. If you recall, the state provided 5%. We're talking at 20% right now, and that was due to the fact that precipitation was a little bit above last year, but not reaching the normal point as I illustrated earlier. It's 67% as of today. The snowpack is really what I talked about as being very shocking about how significantly low it is. It is in essence 5% of normal. The improvement has not occurred, and that's simply due to the fact that temperatures have been very high. When it did have precipitation, the temperature was very warm, and that water, in essence, did not translate into snow, which is normally what we like to have, which is that natural reservoir, which is having that water in the mountains. And so that has really kind of accelerated a lot of calls for conservation, as well as the governor's recent call that conditions have not improved at all since the drought and droughts continued. This is just another illustration of the snowpack. This was beginning of this year, and you can see what the conditions of today look like. There's really nothing there, and that's just another visual illustration upon the conditions we're facing today. Again, the snowpack is just very, very low. In Colorado, it's been a little scary as well. They're at 56% of normal. They just recently received a storm. I don't know if we have that captured here, but there's a speculation that the chances of a drought occurring in the Colorado side has gone up due to the fact that the drought has kind of extended not just in California but also in the Colorado River Basin. This is just another illustration upon the snow. This is where TWR does the annual snow survey. This is kind of the last one they do that kind of finalizes conditions. This was in 2010, a typical snowpack manual survey by DWR, and this is in essence what was just a couple of weeks ago. So same location, completely different. You'll see in essence no snow whatsoever there. Just highlighting this is what the governor announced his emergency declaration. That kind of resulted with the continuation of the 20% state project water allocation. There's been no change in that. Again, the reason why it's a little bit better than last year's the fact that December increase with precipitation, also slightly with February, allowed DWR to provide more water. In addition, we were able to pump enough water to bring it down to San Luis Reservoir, and basically we know we have 20% there, so DWR feels confident we can deliver that. But we would have to see something significantly changing in the coming months to see that increase. But as you can see, on the Central Valley project side, or the federal side, they're receiving in essence almost no water whatsoever. Now, this has kind of led up to the conditions as on the declaration of allocations. Again, the first slide shows that although we saw 20%, and that's very, very low, and we had 5% the following year, why in essence are we calling for allocations now? We see a slight improvement from last year. Well, again, it's that pull from storage. So the Metropolitan Board had to evaluate the conditions and the draw from storage from the previous years that this drought has continued to impact just their dry year storage balance as well as their demand balance. So we ended 2014 with 1.1 million acre feet of dry year storage. The question now is how do you maintain that or at least stretch that storage out going into 2015? So the board in essence had to make a decision and balance those components out. And here's in essence what staff provided to the board. Again, we have a 20% state project allocation. This is assuming a 25%. DWR did analysis that indicated that there is a 50-50 chance that it could reach from 20 to 25. If they were going to reach 25, it would probably be announced hopefully earlier, but more likely it's going to be at the end of the summer period when they can evaluate overall conditions of their key reservoirs. But with that scenario in place, Metropolitan feels confident they can receive around 930,000 acre feet from the Colorado Basin supply. A 25% state project allocation should get them a little shy of 500. They feel that they could secure transfers and exchanges. Now that has been drawn into question recently, some of the conditions we're facing. But if we ran this scenario, the pull from storage was going to be a little bit over 230,000 acre feet. Now, with those transfers and exchanges maybe not come into play, they might be able to pull more from that. And that's important because the analysis that Metropolitan provided to make that decision or that recommendation for level 3 had to balance not only this year's supplies, but also next year's supplies. And assuming conditions continue to be the exact same as they're facing today, it was, again, that balance of how do we maintain a shortage allocation that's not too severe within one given year, but not going to impact 2016-17. So this scenario shows that there might be enough water we can pull from storage to maintain at least 2 years of a dry year scenario. And the recommendation was a level 3. Now the board concurred with that recommendation. There was a lot of debate as to whether or not a stage level 4 might be more appropriate based on the conditions we're facing, but the majority of the board felt that a stage level 3. And what that really means is basically roughly a 15% reduction on imported supplies. They indicated that conditions might change as we talked about, and they would the board would revisit the decision based on water supply conditions in December 2015. Now that means that it could go, the stage level may be recommended to be going up, meaning maybe a stage level 4, or it could potentially go down. The board wanted to take time to evaluate conditions to determine if there's a change that's needed. They're not saying that there will make a change, they're just saying to evaluate whether a change would be needed. MWDOC the next day followed with a similar action and authorized the general manager to implement our water supply allocation, again at a stage level 3. And an allocation would last for a 12-month period starting July 1st, 2015, ending June 30th, 2016. For this committee here, the question was raised as to how this allocation would impact imported water that Orange County Water District received. We held a meeting on April 8th with Metropolitan staff to discuss the conditions of the Orange County basin and determine the need of imported water in the coming year. That meeting went very well. We are going to provide Metropolitan with additional information. Once the recommendation is made, the amount of water that Orange County Water District could receive at a stage level 3 is illustrated in the chart down below. It's approximately 51,255 acre-feet. That includes the MWDOC amount as well as the 3 cities. It is a separate allocation from the M&I allocation we have to retail agencies, meaning that this water is exclusively only used for replenishment purposes, and the water cannot be transferred to the M&I usage. However, we were able to talk to Metropolitan and have an opportunity that if our M&I with our retail agencies, if they stayed below their allocation, could water be moved through one of the service connections that's provided for Orange County Water District. Metropolitan indicated that could possibly happen. We'd have to evaluate the conditions of our retail agencies and see how they're tracking, but if there is water available, in essence water that they have conserved and not going to use on the import side, we will discuss that and see if there's an opportunity to possibly provide more water through this connection here.
Can I ask you a question? You were using the 10-year average,
Mhm.
but I thought we had a contract for 65,000 acre-feet. Why aren't you using that?
That was a purchase order contract that simply allowed you to purchase the water at the tier 1 pricing. Okay, that's a pricing contract. This is an allocation. This is dealing with the water supply. Okay.
Wasn't there also verbiage, so if there were an allocation year, that we would not have to fulfill that requirement?
Yes, if an allocation occurred, the commitment amount of 65,000 acre feet, remember it's up to that amount, would not be applicable to MWDOC, which therefore would not be applicable to Orange County Water District. That's correct. And with that being said, I can answer some questions.
So what does the extremely low snowpack mean to Metropolitan's water supply plan? Anything?
Yeah, it means a couple of things. I think the first thing I would highlight is the impact upon how the pumps can be operated. For example, normally when there is a decent amount of snowpack, the runoff comes in play, and that simply allows the fishery agencies to allow the pumps to be operated in a more regular and typical manner. What Metropolitan and what TVR is saying is that because there's simply not going to have as much snowpack, the water that's going to be needed for the fish are more likely going to have to be used out of the key reservoirs. Therefore, more likely, in another way of saying it, supersede the urban users or the conveyance of water being brought down through the delta. And I think that has a severe impact on the delivery amounts.
But the total supply of water for the state is much less, isn't it? As that little snowflake is not there, it melts. My snowflake, when it melts, it runs into the rivers and
Right.
the dams,
Right.
and that's just the Sacramento River and on and on.
Yes.
What does all that missing water mean?
Well, I would say again, if
that the only
the
factor?
missing water obviously does not improve not only those key reservoirs, but also smaller reservoirs. That could lead to further groundwater pumping. It also can lead, obviously, to the state contractors, which are a lot of farmers, but also it limits the amount of water available to be pumped down to Southern California.
I might point out that while the amount of precipitation that happened over the winter in the mountains that normally would be in snow is reduced, the high temperatures had both melting early and that precipitation in the form of rain, which did lead to an increase in storage in, for example, Oroville. So that water just isn't in snow, it's in the reservoir. However, because of the fisheries release for cold water, it will change because there won't be a continued snow melt of a supply of low water. There will be additional releases, most likely, for the salmon runs in terms of adjusting the temperature and the flow in the river. So it does have an impact there. The 20% Table A allocation is based on that precipitation. So there is, rather than the long-term average, is about a 60% allocation from Table A. It's at 20% right now and is likely to stay at 20% at least till late in the year.
You anticipated my follow-up question. What was the total participation in California, both snow and rain, compared to normal
I
years?
see what you're saying.
Yeah, that's what I really.
You know, I don't have the raw figures, but we can get those. Again, we don't want to provide an extensive presentation, but obviously the snowpack at 5% illustrates that the runoff is extremely low. So we'd have to pull up exactly what the average amounts would be. The precipitation has simply just been all wet water, and that has improved, obviously, the key reservoirs from last year. But it doesn't help with the duration of time. In fact, with the water not being, and the water not being, let's say, being over the time, as well as the temperatures, has affected a number of fishery restrictions, and that, in essence, has prevented water being pumped down. But I do want to note that the state contractors and EBR have been working together to regulate the pumping restrictions that have been able to bring at least 20% of the water down to through the delta. Right. And that, in essence, is why I think we're in a better position than we were last year. But just like Rob indicated, DWR is not entertaining additional pumping. I believe the pumps right now are operating very, very low. I think they're only operating one pump as of right now because of that. Because they're holding that water for the remaining of the spring as well as the summer for the fish.
Yeah, Harvey, has MWD or MWDOC made an assessment of the water demand situation, say for 15-16, based on what the State Water Resources Control Board is requesting or requiring from the water purveyors in terms of reductions, which seem to be on the order of 25%?
Yeah, I think everyone's still determining what their number is, what they need to say, but I think the 25% is a good marker to look at. I think those conversations are occurring right now to see exactly what the impact will be. But let me just do a rough calculation for you. Demands are roughly around 2 million acre-feet for metropolitan. More likely is that if an agency needs to conserve, they're going to do it probably on the most expensive cost of water, which typically seems to be metropolitan water. So if we estimated that all 25% of that savings would be on metropolitan, the impact could be roughly 500,000 acre-feet. So we could see sales of around 1.5. But it's not all going to fall on that, so we're probably, I think Metropolitan is looking at their sales would drop at least anywhere between 300, 350, maybe 400 overall with the governor's call. But we're already calling for a 15% reduction. And that 15% reduction should bring sales close to their budget. Their budget estimate's around 1.75, and they have money in their rate stabilization funds. So there is a question of how much of that impact or how much of they're going to have to drop. The other issue is that, remember, the state control board is asking for 9 months, and that's starting actually before the fiscal year starts. So we'll see how things kind of turn out. It may not have a full month, 12-month impact on Metropolitan's overall finances, and that should be evaluated in that.
Yes, Harvey, two things. First of all, I noticed in your slide, if you go back showing where the water's coming from, right there. No, yeah, that's it. You're only showing 0.93 on the Colorado Aqueduct, and it carries 1.25. And I understand that Met is not using their full Palo Verde, draw this year, and I'm wondering, is there some reason we're not taking all the water that we're entitled to on the Colorado, or that we could take on the Colorado and not having a full aqueduct, which I thought was a primary policy of MWD? That's the first question. And the second question, sort of along with what Phil was talking about, we had a more normal rainfall this year, but we had much higher temperatures, and the growth in the Sierras and also in the Colorado, started earlier, and the evapotranspiration went way up, and that's where the water went. It didn't come down in runoff and fill the reservoirs and it isn't in snowpack, it evaporated, it transpirated. But in California, you have the, Shasta and Oroville. How are they going to be operated, and what is that going to do to our supply when we're, getting the cold water for the fish down in Red Bluff and all the other things, and the X2 outfall?
Yeah, no, to that last question, I think that's why DPR is not planning to increase the 20% anytime soon, because they're holding that water in key reservoirs for the fish. In regards to the second question, I think there's a couple components in there. One, when you said, is Metropolitan accessing all their Colorado River water, are you referring to, you mentioned PBID, you talking about the fouling program?
Right.
Or are you talking about the ICS?
Met has the ability to do a lot of following in Palo Verde,
Right.
and they have a contract
Right.
that they pay into.
Right.
And my understanding is they're not exercising the full contract this year, or they haven't yet, and the aqueduct is not full.
Yeah, let me provide a little bit of information on that one. I know you're familiar with it because you were one of the architects of that early on. If you remember the fouling program, Metropolitan has called and exercised all of its fouling, but remember it takes an entire year for that actually to be triggered. So when you say this year, you're absolutely right. They're not accessing all the fouling because it takes an entire year for that to occur, which is why the increase happens from 1.93 to 1.96. In addition, the ICS is of a concern because there's a balancing impact upon where Lake Mead is at. So as of right now, Metropolitan has a little bit over 100,000 acre feet that they could take out of Lake Mead for ICS storage. And if they do that, and with the conditions right now in the Colorado River, it would bring down the Lake Mead to that shortage trigger point that we always mention. Now, Metropolitan or Southern California, or California will not be impacted, but the two states that would be Southern Nevada and Arizona. Southern Nevada probably could take that reduction that would occur in the shortage impact, but Arizona is not in that luxury point. They could lose anywhere between 300 to 400,000 acre feet. So now you have a balance there. Does Metropolitan take over 100,000 and that impacts Arizona by 300 to 400,000, or could there be a deal? And I think that's what they're working at. So the question is how the ICS will be used. I think Metropolitan is going to be accessing some of it, but will they be accessing all of that? And but there's also an exchange with Southern Nevada that's not included in the Colorado base supplies, but rather included in the transfer areas. That could bring actually close to over 1 million acre feet.
So in your 0.93, are you not counting the San Diego? No.
Yes, the 0.93 we are including San Diego.
You are counting, because if I calculate, Imperial 1, Imperial 2, the drop structure, the Palo Verde deal, all the deals there should be like 1.1 million there, and it's only 0.9. And what happened to the other 200,000 acre feet?
Well, again, they haven't been able to access all of their fouling programs because, again, when you call for it, it takes a year for it to be called upon. There is a couple of exchanges components within the transfer and exchange area of that 1.7.
And with a really dry year last year, we didn't call it for this year? Is that what you're telling me?
I believe Metropolitan called on a number of them and actually accelerated a couple of their fouling programs. And remember, it takes a year, so they did call upon it within, I think that at the end of December of 2014, you did. But as I showed here, early on, Metropolitan was estimating that in December, the conditions would have just been normal, probably not have been in the same condition as before. And so that decision was made in December, if I recall.
Bad decision.
I believe it's I want to say it's a calendar year call, but or let me rephrase it. I think it's a 12-month period upon when you actually trigger that call, and then actually when they have to respond to the fouling program. Yeah, I think it's a 12-month agreement process.
And when you say 1.2 million, is that based on the full pump flow and
Yeah, I think it's pumping all pumps,
We had,
24/7.
we had to shut down, was it twice or once? I know we shut down
We
once.
had a shutdown recently, a couple of months ago, on the Colorado River once, and I don't know if there's an earlier one. I was like, 3 weeks, yeah, for cleaning, yeah. Because the Colorado River was pumping for, not just this year, but also last year, just
No, something else.
You do, which is why they had to create the shutdown.
So it's a combination of the shutdown plus the capacity that's been impacted by the flow rate.
And the fouling program, yeah, all those, yeah.
All right. Are we finished the MWD update? Further questions? Amplifications? Not appearing. Item 2, OCWD update. Who's it back?
Mr. Kennedy.
And a fine job you did. We might even start with the John Kennedy bobblehead. The collector's item.
So, never had a bobblehead before yet. Just some information about the water district. I wanted to start with the groundwater replenishment system. We are getting toward the ends of completing the expansion of the project. We're adding another 30 MGD, so we'll get the plant from 70 up to 100 MGD. We've had the plant up to 90 MGD the last few days, but we're right in the middle of commissioning the additional 30 MGD and hope to have it done in a few weeks here and get the initial expansion plant running up to the full capacity. And now we're moving on to the final expansion to get another 30 MGD to get the total plant up to 130 million gallons a day. That will require recycling water from the sanitation district plant number 2. We literally are recycling every drop of water from plant number 1 now. So we just entered into a big study with the sanitation district. We're splitting the cost, a $2 million study that has just started. It's going to take about a year, but that will figure out the best option on how to start recycling plant number 2 flows. So we hope to have that done in about 12 months. The status of the groundwater basin, we have projected that by the end of this year, as of June 30, 2015, the basin overdraft will be about 416,000 acre-feet. So, and then the red line shows what the overdraft would be if you took out the remaining water that MWD has in their cup storage account. Met will have about 16,000 acre-feet in their cup storage account by the end of the year. So if you took that water out, the overdraft would be about 432,000 acre-feet by the end of the year. What's going on right now, we're taking 60 CFS of Met untreated full service water. Met's holding us at that level of deliveries. So we'll probably be doing that through the rest of this fiscal year. Base flows are pretty low for this time of year. They've been ranging from about 60 to 80 CFS. Jumping into next year, our board just recently set the basin production percentage at 70%. So we only dropped it about 72%. We kept it relatively high so that we could qualify for Met water next year under the new allocation rules. You can't drop your basin pumping significantly and qualify for the Met water for next year under the allocation rules that have been set up. So next year we'll have a 70% BTP, and then the replenishment assessment increased from 294 to 322 an acre foot. And these actions were taken on April 15th.
John, you might just very briefly go through what the major components of that increase in the RA were.
The biggest factor was buying Met untreated water. This year we have 40,000 acre feet of Met untreated water in our budget. Next year, we're going to jump up to 65,000 acre feet, so that's a big expense, but then we lowered it down to 55,000 acre feet, so we're going to go from this year having 40,000 acre feet in our budget to next year having 55,000 acre feet in our budget, so that causes the biggest increase in the RA just to allow us to buy that water. And just where do we think we're gonna get water next year? This shows the groundwater basin, water balance. We have base flows have sort of leveled off around 64,000 acre feet. So that's what we're budgeting for next year. Santa Ana River storm flows to water we get in the wintertime at 42,000 acre feet. That's what the average has been over the last 5 years. Incidental recharge, that the average over the last 5 years has been 51,000 acre feet. The groundwater replenishment system, our goal is to get 103,000 acre feet, but we think more realistically we'll probably be getting around 98,000 acre feet of GWS water in the basin next year. And then for the met supplies, we have budgeted 55,000. Harvey showed how the allocation formula gives us around 51,000. But we are hoping at the end of next year that MWDOC may have a little extra water that they can give us that we would buy. So maybe we'll be purchasing around 55,000 acre feet under the allocation rules. And the other is the little bit of water we inject at the Alamitos barrier. So total water into the basin, 312,000 acre feet next year. With the 70% BPP, total pumping would be around 322,000. However, now with the governor's call for 25% demand reductions, total pumping will be less. We're not sure how much less. We'll be following this every month next fiscal year, tracking how total water demands come down because of the governor's call, and then that will reduce pumping. And so we'll probably have total pumping less than 322,000. And we'll just monitor this during the year and see if we need to respond anyway during the year. But
Yeah, keeping in mind, John, that the board does have the ability to change the BPP at any time. So we're not restricted in changing that. The board can take that action. Where the board can't take an action mid-year is setting the RA. So once that's set in April, it goes until the following April. The BPP can be adjusted. So as John mentioned, if we saw that we weren't pumping as much out of the basin, we may come back to the board and recommend a slightly higher BPP.
Don't you think that if people were going to cut back, it would be on their water, not necessarily our water?
Yeah, well, total water demands we think are 445,000 acre feet. So with the governor's call, total water demands may go down to say 400,000, but the 70% is times the 400,000. So it ends up being both, reducing met and groundwater. Well, that's it. Can I answer any questions?
Apparently you got a cracker jack. No further remarks on item number 2. Item 3 is an update on MWDOC and OCWD building issues, land repairs and upgrades. I know there was many meetings, just Mr. Kennedy as well.
I'm going to tee it up for Mr. Marcus.
Okay, all right, so you're going in for the MVP.
Like a bobbleheads all.
Glad to see. But we are thinking of souvenir blankets.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. We were asked to give an update on our hallway project. You probably noticed as we come in the hallway, there's been some changes over the last several months, and we've taken out some of the old cabinetry in the panels, and we've installed some drywall along the corridor. And we have been working with Discovery Science Center, Discovery Cube, has been our consultant working on this project. We've been working internally also, and have come up with this concept for the hallway to use it kind of as an educational feature. Originally, we thought we may build a visitor center as a part of GWRS, but that didn't get any traction. So we thought the next best thing would be to have some sort of a hallway with some interactive features, and this is kind of a concept of what it would look standing from the foyer and looking out towards the parking lot. So this mainly just shows kind of the color schemes. I mean, the contents talk about where does Orange County waters come from. It's a state map. We talk about the state Santa Ana watershed, the Orange County Water District, the groundwater basin. We talk also about the hydrogeology, about GWRS as you progress down the hallway. The concept here is that we would take the doors at the end of the hallway, which currently a lot of people use to enter the building, and we would secure those doors so that we would try to bring everyone through the main entrance. So we would make this more of a main entrance in the front, bring people through, and then if we were to give them a tour of GWRS, it may start in this room, it may start in our conference room, and then it would go down the hallway, exit through the doors, and then out into the plant. So that's kind of the general scheme. I'm not quite sure. Oh, this just kind of drills down and talks about the different areas where we talk about GWRS, the lab, the groundwater basin, as far as where our water comes from. So this shows more of the content areas. And I guess that ends my presentation. Although I may mention that we do have an ad hoc building committee between the two agencies. And we're attempting to schedule a meeting of that committee. We had one date, we kind of misfired on it, but we're trying to set up another meeting, more or less to go over the common areas, the joint areas, which are this room, the boardroom, the foyer, the conference room adjacent to the boardroom, which conference room C3, and then the reception area. And the concept there is to come up with a little bit of an update from the 1990 carpeting and wall paneling and give those areas a little bit of a facelift. So the concept there is to get concurrence with that committee on what those changes were, and then bring those changes back to both boards for their approval, and then implement those changes.
Mike, that joint committee meeting is set for a week from today.
Okay.
If it's still on, that's the last.
Yeah, I haven't checked my calendar, so
Change it from 8:30 to 8, I thought. I don't know.
we'll make sure that everyone has the correct information. We'll make sure that the correct consultants are at the meeting this time around. But we would like to move forward with those. As far as the hallway, we're probably still about 3 months away from completion. We're in early fabrication. We're still deciding content to a certain degree. About midway down the hall, there's going to be two 70-inch monitors where we'll be able to also have some content that people will be able to view along with graphics as well. So that'll be part of the interactive component of the hallway.
I understand you're going to have a map of water sources for, is that of all of Orange County, or is that just of Orange County Water District, or Orange
No,
County?
it's of all of Orange County, the entire.
Okay,
Yeah, we'll go from the state level to the watershed to all of Orange County.
okay, thank you.
All I can say is it should be an interesting meeting next week. I know my wife and I had to pick out some new fabric to do some redecorating on a simple piece of furniture in our house.
Did you win or lose?
I had a lot of compromises. I had to promise her that when our TV set died, we'd buy one of those big color one.
There's no doubt about it.
I decided to embrace expense.
Ask Phil and I how we did together.
I think I'll wait for the vote. Further comments on that? None appearing. The next item is decide the resources project status. OCWD staff will provide information regarding actions and future meetings.
I'll give a quick update.
You want to take it?
Sure. Go ahead and get it. On March 18th, we put out a term sheet that we have with Poseidon that the district is considering. And then on May 14th, we're going to have a special board meeting for the board to consider that term sheet. So that's a big date for the water district, May 14th at 5:30. We've been having meetings with our Citizens Advisory Committee that was established. We have 20 people on that committee. We're going to be having 4 meetings. We've had 2, we'll have 2 more. They're going over the term sheet and the project in general. We hired a professional facilitator, Paul Brown, to help run those meetings. We have another one tomorrow night in this room, the 3rd meeting of that committee. And that committee will give a lot of input to the board as the board evaluates the term sheet on May 14th. So that's some highlights of what's happening here.
Applications.
I have a question
Yes.
on the side project. Poseidon in the term sheet that they've mostly prepared is expecting the LRP money from Metropolitan. I think you folks have applied for that, haven't you?
We have applied.
And Metropolitan is sitting on it until the coastal commission is done?
I think they have to see the final product.
Yeah, yeah. One question,
Currently, there are monies available.
how much money did you apply for?
We applied for, and it is subsequently changed, I believe. I'm looking at Harvey, it's how much an acre foot?
At the time, the application was submitted, the LRP incentive was up to $250 per foot. So based on the cost side, it would be a full $250. Since that application time and to now, in between, there was a revision of the LRP, and they offer 3 different incentive options. And so there's a reapplication that needs to occur. And it's just simply, there was a new form, you simply have to put in the new information in that form. But they are asking as to which of the 3 options, financial options you would like to choose. What we have heard is that Poseidon, in your negotiations, is leaning toward the higher one, which is, I believe, $475 per acre foot to a 15-year period. It's kind of a more upfront financial option. I believe once conditions have reached that point on your side, then that thought should simply be checked off. But I would say it's not fixated to the point that if we wanted to look at another financial option, it's a very easy conversation.
That's really Poseidon's choice, is it, or what have they told us, John?
475 over 15 years.
They're expecting that.
Well,
Have their
there
deal.
are other options available. We have to decide at Met Fountain. And we would be delighted to have a new water source. We have funding set aside. That does not mean that it's a done deal. There's always an opportunity for something to go awry.
I believe at this dollar amount over 15 years, if they were at full production for the 15 years, the total cash
It's a
flow
lot of money.
is $406 million. That would have to go to the Met Board for approval, and as Director Dick indicated, it's not done till it's done, so.
Do you think there's a chance that'd be approved or not approved?
I would think there'd be a very good chance it would be approved. It is a significant investment on the part of Met. We're going to have a number of questions, and I'm sure they'll all be answered to the best of the ability of all the parties concerned. If it meets the needs of the Met Board in order to reassure them that the appropriate acts will be taken. And you'll have some strong questions coming. I'm thinking of people like Mr. Paul Koretz. Mr. Koretz has some grave and deep concerns about this sort of thing. But I think Met has proven to be a good partner, and MWDOC has worked diligently to try to be a good bridge. I think we're at, about $50 million into the GWRS at this point.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And we're happy that that's happened. Don't misunderstand.
That's a bargain.
Consider it a good investment.
As far as Poseidon, why don't you guys buy the water yourselves? You got all that money sitting there.
You guys have
All
all
that money.
right?
Yeah, but we're not really in the business, buying water like that and trying to distribute it to your customers, which we sort of got to think about doing.
I thought you had a term sheet.
We don't have a term sheet. There's one laying there, a draft, but it's got all kinds of flaws in it from my point of view. The worst thing is that they're trying to tie the future cost of the Poseidon water to the future metropolitan rate. And there's no real connection between the two. Metropolitan rate doesn't influence what it costs Poseidon to make its water. So if your future Met rate keeps going up, it's free money for them. If it dives down, they're in trouble. I mean, that's just a crazy thing to do. At least that's what I think. I mean, some other board members do too. So the term sheet's not done. That's why I was asking you, is the LRP, how's it going to be decided? And you just answered that, which is good.
I think there's an interest in being very supportive for new sources of water, whether it be for transfers or desal or.
Have you guys discussed buying Poseidon water yourselves?
Met has historically not pursued that. We have in the past talked about desal. undercurrent of support at that for East South. We have a parcel of land up north of, South Park that has been reserved for that at some future time. Right now, our keenest interest is trying to get the Delta fixed.
Yes, I would
If
agree.
we had the Delta fixed, we would have picked up, I'm gonna say another
Yeah.
1,600,000 feet over the past 8 years, which would go a long way right now in having cured some of our storage problems.
I've got to bring up one other thought, speaking of the Delta. You know, that's been such a problem for all of us, particularly in your position for years, because of the environmental influence and how much you can pump. You know, as we're all dying of thirst slowly now, has anybody thought of going back and asking to have the God Squad come out and control some of these environmental things until we're all not dying of thirst so bad?
I believe that certainly that conversation's been held. I know there's some questions have been asked at Metropolitan. I know the governor seems to be open to a lot of things.
Well, I think now is the time to demonstrate, because
In DC apparently has not been as open toward that notion. I was not there. I understand the governor has indicated that, you know, he was certainly the most pro-environment governor in the nation, and that it was.
Who is?
Brown.
Jerry, really? I didn't know that.
That's the rumor. And he said if he was willing to take that step,
Yeah.
that it should bring with it
Well,
a certain
yeah.
amount of credibility, but the administration has been a bit reluctant.
But I think we're in a sort of extremely dangerous condition now, where you start worrying about you kill the fish or kill the people, or make us all go back to where we came from in
It's a
Iowa.
valid concern.
So anyway,
It's a valid concern, and you continue to see Governor Brown on television saying things, answering questions about the 80% of the water that's going to agriculture.
and the 40% going to environmental things.
As many of us have talked about, you know, they need to, I think they should point out the difference between water and developed water. At 80%, but they talk about agriculture, probably is gonna sort out in the neighborhood of 40%, give or take. And the questions are arisen, you know, how important is that to us? How important is it to the economy?
Well, you and Metropolitan.
Would your life change if you never ate another almond? Would your life change if the Delta smelt were not there? I mean,
That's
you
right.
know, where do you find the decisions to serve the
But you and
public?
Metropolitan have some huge issues and questions before you, so, which we all depend on. Anyway,
Well,
best of luck.
We have Linda Ackerman and
Well, that's-
McKinney, you know, to balance out.
What about Director Barber?
Well, he's not here, you don't get the bobblehead dog named after you.
so we can talk about him,
Not
right?
here.
Is that, are we gonna talk about him?
That's right. Anything that you don't like, it was his fault. And if there's a committee assignment, let's make sure we give it to him. Okay, anything further on the Poseidon project?
I just had a question. How much money is currently left in the LRP program?
I can't tell you. It's a secret.
It's not set up that way where there's money left on an account. It is kind of
As Harvey said, the LRP program is projected toward acre feet of acquisition.
How many acre feet are left?
That's the question we're gonna go to.
There's
There's enough we can take out.
There's an IRP goal of achieving, you know, certain acre feet of water. I don't think we can go into that, but there's not a set account of dollars set aside for that. It is a kind of pay as you go. That's why the board will evaluate the projects. They approve not only just the project, but they approve the incentive, that which is embedded within the stewardship rate. Now, projects have a financial lifetime, meaning that they usually have a 25-year agreement or production stops. The first projects that tend to meet the end of that, for example, we have a number of projects in Orange County that have another 25-year life, therefore the incentive is no longer there, and new projects do come online. So I'm trying to basically say is that there's not money set aside for this. It is a pay-as-you-go type of program.
So it's not budgeted?
Excuse me?
It's not budgeted?
Yes, it is not budgeted.
It's what the old story about the federal government, you know, where it's authorized, allocated, that's not authorized.
So
The real key here is that in sight of the horizon, there's more problems, are more problems. So that is to me chaired by the current representative of the water, who's also Orange County is well represented by Mr. McKinney. And it is probably one of the most important committees that we currently have meeting at that moment. Because you have to look at the sources we currently embrace and those that we shall potentially embrace going forward in order to meet the demands. What kind of costs are there? There are costs in dollars and cents we're talking about now. There's cost and support for the community. If you build a plant that they don't want the community, it's a problem. There's cost to the environment, and there's the benefits that reside in the action. It's an important committee. I'm glad that Mr. McKinney stepped up and is on it. And it's one that probably bear watching by all of us to see how it comes forward.
So the Poseidon project would be asking for about, if I did the math right, about $25 million a year over a 15-year period.
Approximately.
And that would have to be taken to the Met Board for its approval at some point, assuming that they got the approval.
When the staff is ready to move forward, it would be brought to the board for a final authorization. Then it does not require annual reallocation.
Right, it's just one time. Right.
One time.
After 15 years, it goes to zero?
Yeah.
After
Is
50.
that the deal?
Well, you have, again, as Marty said, you have.
Well, you can take a lower amount.
No, I don't, but if you choose,
In
if
this
you choose
case,
the
that's the way it
475
would
option,
be.
after 15 years, it's zero?
Yeah, you have to still,
You get a higher dollar amount up front, but you get a shorter period of time.
And if it's based on the differential between that cost and the cost of net water, if those lines actually start to move together, the amount that you get per year, that dollar amount per acre foot decreases.
Right.
When they cross, it goes to zero. So if those lines crossed in 5 years, they'd only get the first 5 years of payment.
So
It's up to the 475, up to the 475.
Poseidon only gets full 475 if they can prove their costs are more than 475 over the cost of net water.
Correct.
So here again, you have to have the accounting allocation plans. If all of a sudden, cold fusion is developed and energy costs go down, that's my understanding, that's an enormous facet in the cost of actual operation. So that could in turn have an impact on the kind of support that we receive.
Let me just add, the status of Poseidon with MET is we updated the LRP program this year. We specifically, there used to be 2 separate programs, we specifically made sure that desal was added to that program by name. So it's clearly eligible to come in. Their application is in. Essentially, 2 things have to happen at this point. They have to receive all their permits. It will not be considered till
Yeah.
all the permits are complete, you have a final project, and here's what it is. And then the application needs to be acted on and passed, or one way or the other, by the Met Board in terms of the actual agreement to move forward.
Mr. Swan?
So as I understand it, the governor is talking about wanting to break ground next year on the Delta plant. I mean, it is substantially designed. I'm not holding my breath, and you shouldn't either, but when that comes online, it's a 3 to 5 year construction project. Met will have more than enough water, a whole lot more than what they have now. But the Poseidon project, if that was implemented, would have been built, so the demand on the Met system would actually go down, even though they have to absorb all this cost of the Delta fix. So the Met rates are going to get squeezed up because there'll be less sales. And they won't take all the water they could possibly take under the new facility because they won't need it. I mean, there seems to be a little irony in this whole thing that we're doing these 2 projects concurrently.
We've had
Think
those
about it.
conversations before, and ultimately someone's got to decide what to do, whether it be the OCWD talking about, the question becomes, is it excess? And as Pierre points out, it certainly could be. I don't know what's gonna happen on the Colorado River. I don't know whether there's gonna be issues on allowing us to continue to deliver a million two. I don't know whether we're gonna have a lot of water coming down the state water project. But here's what I can tell you. When I left the house this morning, as I've said before, I had health insurance, life insurance, and car insurance. And I didn't intend to use any one of the three. But
You have water insurance too?
maybe we should have it. That's the point. Sometimes you need to pay for things you don't want to have to use just to make sure you're doing the prudent thing for planning. If indeed this is the prudent thing for planning, then it is the responsibility of the water agency to evaluate it and come to that decision.
Another point of reference, Larry, mostly Poseidon prepared term sheet, they wouldn't go into full production if they get all their other steps done for 5 years and 8 months from today, to actually go into production. Well, think about it. The drought will either kill us by then, or else we'll move back to the Midwest where we came from. Well, that's just what they have in there.
Well, you know, and I trust you to know what it is. And once again, I don't know how long the drought's gonna last. I mean, if you talk to some of the individuals that have looked at this, and they come up with 35-year cycles, right, moving back to the Midwest.
I'm just saying for your planning at Metropolitan and every place else, that's roughly what Poseidon says. They take them, they go through all the steps and then design and build the place.
Well, they don't get the full LRP during that full 5 years, do they?
No, it's
think so.
based
Get
on,
any
it's based on production.
Real production.
Right,
We only pay at Metropolitan for wet water.
right.
And then how much we pay, as we discussed several times, it depends on the agreement that Poseidon going once, going twice.
Sold to Metropolitan.
So, remaining committee schedules.
Trying to help you, that's all I'm saying.
In that case, remaining committee schedules for this August through in 2015 is July 22nd, and October 28th. Everybody likes that? Good. This meeting is adjourned.
Good work.
Ask the MWDOC directors to hang tight.
Sure.
We have received a letter from Mesa. It discusses the candidacy of Director Atkinson for the Mesa Board, who has an interest in an open seat at Aqua, Region 10. We have, as you may recall, taken a step this week to speak well of our friend, Chuck, right here. There he is. Chuck Gibson. The question is, before us, at the request of the Mesa organization, should we also endorse Mr. Atkinson? If that is the case, I would need to hear, we need to call a board meeting, and then we need to hear a movement to bring, a motion to bring this up, and we have to take a vote.
You think of endorsing both of us?
That was the query.
Oh, okay.
Did we get a request from Mr. Lamar too?
I have not seen or heard anything from Director Lamar. Director Atkinson, I did see yesterday at the Waco planning meeting.
All the candidates.
He indicated this would be forthcoming, it has arrived, we are here, we can address it. You need to tell me whether or not we're going to go into a special board meeting, whether or not you wish us to. And the reason we're asking this today, as the gentleman has pointed out, this massive walking campaign, you know, covers what? Is it 6 people, 7? They get the vote on that? You need 4 votes? So,
There's one right there.
6 is right here, it's green.
The
Larry,
director
yeah, Larry
represents
gets-
Mesa is not here today. Just curious if he'd want to weigh in, but I like them both. I think it's tough to take a picture, you know. And I had heard Lamar was going to run too, so.
Are we in a board meeting?
We're not in a board meeting, we're trying to decide if we want to call a special board meeting.
I haven't gotten anything. Only gotten something from Chuck.
Okay. Do I hear any interest in having a special board meeting? Going once, going twice. Third and final time. No board meeting, Mr. General Manager. I will contact Mr. Atkinson and let him